الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. اللهم علمنا وانفعنا وعلمنا وزدنا علما. If you remember last time, we talked about an incident that took place during the, if you remember from the beginning of this Seerah series, we were focusing on sometimes within while on the lessons that we derive from this series. And part of what we learn about Prophet Muhammad is his supreme skills of leadership. His supreme skills of leadership. In Medina, he was establishing a new community. A community that was threatened from inside and outside. There were many external enemies, Qurayshis and other tribes. Even later on, enmity expanded to reach into the empires surrounding Arabia, okay? The Persian Empire and the Muhammad Empire. So Islam has become a threat, posing a threat. Although no Muslim has been to this place, and Muslims were feeble, were very weak, few in number, limited in resources. But the strength of Iman, the strength of Islam, of the ideology that Islam brings, was a threat to those people, because Islam calls for justice, freedom, unity, obedience to Allah. And those tyrants surrounding Arabia don't want that. They wanted people to submit to them, and they were the supreme rulers who would impose on those people whatever they wanted for centuries. For centuries. And Islam was bringing a new world order that threatened. Anyway, we go to the Battle of the Trench. One of the nights, because the Battle of the Trench took place, I think, during winter time, and it is windy and cold in Medina. It is windy and cold in Medina. And the Prophet ﷺ, it was his habit. It's not his strategy, it's not a habit, it's the strategy that the Prophet ﷺ was following, that he would bring his companions every night to sit together, review what was going on during the day and the previous days, and what they plan to do in the coming days. Especially that Medina is facing a very serious threat. 10,000 people have come from all over, armed to the teeth, ready to take Medina, So the Prophet ﷺ, one night, wanted to know what was taking place on the enemy camp. In the enemy's camp. So his companions were sitting around. And he said, I want one of you to go and find out about what the Qurayshis are planning, and their own allies are planning, and what's going on in their own camp. Nobody responded, because it was a very cold night, a very dark night. Everybody was full of fear. And you remember the ayah where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes the situation. وَإِذْ جَاءُوكُمْ مِنْ فَوْقِكُمْ وَمِنْ أَسْفَلِ مِنْكُمْ وَإِذْ زَاغَتِ الْأَبْصَارُ وَبَلَغَتِ الْقُلُوبُ الْحَنَاجِرَ وَتَظُنُّونَ بِاللَّهِ الظُّنُونَ. That the Muslims were in a very difficult situation. The Jews declared treason from inside Medina. The allies came from all over, from the top, from the bottom. Okay? And the Muslims were fearing for their families, for their home, because they left them behind and went into the place where the trench is. And nobody was covering their back. The Jews at any moment might step into Medina and take it over. So the situation was very difficult, extremely difficult and dangerous. The Prophet ﷺ said it again, who is going to find out for us what is taking place in the enemy's camp? Second time, nobody responded. The Prophet ﷺ, for the third time, requested if anybody would volunteer to go and find out. It was a difficult night. Nobody responded. Then the Prophet ﷺ changed the tone of his voice, and he said, Hudayfa. He said, here I am, O Prophet of Allah. Now you cannot hide. He said, Hudayfa, I want you to go out to the enemy's camp and find out what they're doing, and don't ever do anything. Hudayfa had to obey. Hudayfa said, by Allah, if the Prophet ﷺ didn't appoint me by name, I wouldn't have volunteered. He said, everybody was fearing, full of fear. But Hudayfa had to accept. Hudayfa radiallahu anhu. Have you heard of Hudayfa before? Hudayfa ibn Yaman. He is one of the youngest sets of the Sahaba, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. He was one of the young sets of Sahaba. I think at that time he was in his 20s. 18, 19, 20, 21, 23, 24. But those were not kids. They were very responsible men. They were brought up in the school of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. They were brought up to take the mission of Islam, to know what they were created for and what they have given the pledge for. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So Hudayfa said, if Prophet Muhammad sallallahu by Allah, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam did not call me by name, I wouldn't have volunteered. So he went to the enemy camp. And he described the situation that took place. He said, I went to the enemy camp and they were in a very unorganized way. The wind was moving the tents fast. And the army was in a very bad psychological situation. The leader of the Mushrif army of the allies was Abu Sufyan himself. And he was moving from one place to another, and he was very much worried. He was worried for many reasons. For the difficult weather situation that they're going through, the weather was very bad. It was a cold night and a windy night, and they were in the open. To the extent that their fire sometimes were extinguished by they would put a pot on top of these fires and cook, and the water would fall in the fire and would put the fire off, and the people were not really in a good situation. But Hudayfa said, I heard him saying, this is a dark night. We are going into a difficult situation. Muhammad is going to send some of his spies to us. And be careful. Let's make sure that everybody knows who sits next to him. And he said, I grabbed the one next to me and said, who you are? And he said, I'm so and so. This is the intelligence of Prophet Muhammad. Before they would call him, he called on somebody next to him. Okay. He said, by Allah, Abu Sufyan was only a few meters away from me, I could have killed him. But I remember the word of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, just go, observe, collect information, and don't do anything. He said, I remember. And this is the character of an intelligence. They could keep their own composure. They know how to deal in difficult situations. And this is why he was not hated by Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. Anyway, he came to Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. He said, by Allah, I came to Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, and he was waiting for me, standing up in the darkness. Is it Hudayfa? Yes, O Rasulullah. And I told him what the enemy camp was going for. Let's look at this narration during the time of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ with this young man. First of all, why would Prophet Muhammad ﷺ select him from among all those great Sahaba? Something we mentioned last time, that the leaders, the good leader, the great leader, like Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, knows his men, knows his people very well, knows the people who are going to carry responsibility. And which type of responsibility? I'm good for something, you're good for something, he's good for something else. We cannot be good for everything in the same way. And the Prophet ﷺ knew that. And he knew that about Khalifa ibn Yaman radiallahu anhu, that he was called the secret keeper of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. He was the only one other than Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam who knew the munafiqeen, the hypocrites, one by one, to the extent that Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu would ask him later on, he said, Khalifa, am I among the munafiq? He said, go away, this is the secret of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. I'm not going to tell you. He said, oh, Umar is among the hypocrites. Umar is among the hypocrites. Umar is among the hypocrites. Those people, Allah prayed, and they are afraid to be hypocrites about us. We think that we are the greatest believers ever. We even compare ourselves not with Abu Bakr and Umar, but with the Prophet himself. Allah Ta'ala. And Hudayfa would hold them by hand and say, Umar, by Allah, if you ask me another time, I will not tell you. You are not from another. So, Hudayfa was the intelligence man of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He was young. He was a good secret keeper. There is another situation that we may talk about later on that introduced Hudayfa to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because those people have been trained to carry these responsibilities, to become great leaders, not only of Arabia, but the whole world. Hudayfa himself was one day the leader of Madain itself. And Madain was the capital city of the Persian Empire. غفر الله لي ولكم وللمسلمين أجمعين. وفقنا الله وإياكم لطاعته. السلام عليكم.